Chicago Tonight, Black Voices is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman, and thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, your home is your castle, and it's also your greatest source of wealth. But research shows discrimination in appraisals means many black homeowners are being shut out of getting their home's full value, with long-term effects. Remembering legendary Chicago historian and civil rights activist Timuel Black with two people who he mentored.
It's very full of energy. I love the vibe I get from the piece.
And a young musician, Kaylee Holiday, explains why she embraces the sweet sounds of the cello. And first off tonight, research shows black homeowners are at risk of losing out on the value of their homes due to discrimination in appraisals. In Chicago, a 2015 study found that homes in predominantly white neighborhoods were valued more than 3 times higher than those in black and Latino neighborhoods after controlling for amenities and household income. And across the country, black homeowners report their homes were appraised at a higher value only after owners removed all evidence of being black, family photos, for instance. Now, there is a growing push to pass federal legislation to protect black homeowners from appraisal discrimination. Illinois Congressman Bobby Rush is co-sponsoring a bill that would establish a task force to address this issue.
The bill that I am co-sponsoring, H.R. 2553, the Real Estate Valuation, Fairness, and Improvement Act, will create a red light, create a bright light on this appraisal industry, and will ultimately result in more diversity among appraisers.
Congressman Bobby Rush there sounding the alarm, working to create more diversity in appraisers. Joining us now with more are Lutalo McGee, chair of the Discriminatory Task Force with Illinois Realtors, Marcus Knight, a residential real estate appraiser trainee, and Junia Howell, visiting assistant professor of sociology at the University of Illinois, Chicago. Thanks to the three of you for joining us. Junia Howell, let's start with you, please. We cited your research just a moment ago regarding these disparities in valuation for homes in Chicago. What does your research indicate is behind this difference?
So my work is a series of different pieces that looks at both national and local trends, showing how the historical legacy of what we colloquially call redlining, or the process in which we literally the government went through and graded neighborhoods and gave those that were white and more affluent higher values, is still present today because of the ways in which we use sales comparison approaches that pull on these historical sales, as well as various levels of bias that are built into the systemic element and individual appraisers' decisions.
Marcus Knight, we know that you're relatively new to the profession, but why did you want to become an appraiser? And also give us, if you can, a quick description of how appraisers perform a home valuation.
Sure. Well, I got interested. I have done a lot of work with nonprofit, and I wanted to have a greater impact. And so I learned about the field through an event at the Urban League, and the rest is history. I applied for a scholarship. And I was able to take classes, and now I'm a trainee. In terms of the process, we go in, we do an inspection, we gather key details about the subject property, and we take those back and we make adjustments to sales prices of the comparables, and then we do a reconciliation for a final value opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, and Marcus, really quickly, why do you think it's important to have diversity among appraisers?
Well, as I'm learning, because I'm new to all of this, is that the issue, from my perspective, is you need local market experts. And the biggest thing is that, you don't have a lot of Black and brown appraisers. And so, if you were able to get more Black and brown people into the field who are familiar with these areas, you're more likely to see them, find, it's more due diligence will be done to find better fit comps for subject properties, which will lead to, I think, just in general, like a higher valuation of properties, or fairer valuation of properties, I'll say.
And Lutala McGee, what role can realtors play in ensuring equality in appraisals?
So I think we can play a number of roles. First, we as realtors have to be familiar with the appraisal process, how to work with appraisers, how to counsel our clients in cases where we feel like appraisals have been done unfairly, and provide resources, or be able to provide resources to our clients to challenge bad appraisals when they come along.
Junia, what are like the potential long-term effects on communities of color when homes are undervalued?
Yeah, I mean, there are multiple long-term effects, and we're seeing those effects presently, because this is not a new issue. This has been an issue since really the birth of our current nation state and the way that we conceptualize it, but definitely since 1934, when the National Housing Act passed and we really reformed how we did housing. And so those effects are racial wealth inequality, those effects are health implications, environmental implications. They are pervasive, because how we value property affects how taxes work, affects schools, affects all these different components. And I want to emphasize that while all the individual biases are definitely a part of the story, and we desperately need more diversity in this field, we also need to be willing to seriously rethink about how the larger structure and the system, the comp process that Marcus was mentioning, is built, because those deeper issues are also kind of stripped with this racial inequality and this perpetuation of inequity that we've continued for the last almost century.
And Lutalo, you head up a statewide discriminatory appraisals task force with Illinois Realtors. What is the mission of this task force? Yeah,
so piggybacking off my original answer, one, we're here to educate and empower our clients, both buyers and sellers. Our second mission, or our second kind of a goal, is to make sure that our realtors and our members understand how the appraisal process should go and are able to navigate that process successfully. And then ultimately, we hope to influence changes with the regulatory framework and the policies that govern appraisals and how appraisals are done, to make sure that things are unbiased and fair for all parties.
So Congressman Rush, going back to him again, he says that even he was a victim of appraisal bias. Here's a little bit of what he had to say.
Not only was this appraiser biased because he was a white man coming into a Black neighborhood, and I could see the anxiety on his face when I set eyes on him. He wanted to hurry up and get out of that neighborhood. And so all those subjective influences led him to underappraise my house. So I am a victim of racism in the appraisal industry. And the lack of diversity in the appraisal industry has robbed me and countless others of millions of dollars in terms of our home value.
Congressman Bobby Rush there saying that an appraiser in his neighborhood wanted to hurry up and get out of the neighborhood, and he believes that it led him to undervalue his home. Now, according to the Appraisal Institute, less than 2% of professional appraisers nationwide are Black. So, Marcus, back to you. Does this lack of diversity contribute to the problem?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, this whole so just like Junia was talking about how, appraisers draw from, comparables, and this is stemming from this historic redlining. When you have someone who's a local market expert, someone who's familiar with the neighborhoods, in the market. You know, they have a deeper understanding. So for instance, if my subject property was recently rehabbed, let's say in Chatham, you know, you can have prices that differ by $100,000. But if you understand the market, then you know where to look. And it really boils down to having people who live in the area because they just have a stronger understanding of what's in the area and what's in demand.
And Junia, you know, it's one thing to you know, diversify the number of, you know, the diversity, basically, to diversify the appraisal pool, but what about training existing appraisers to not be biased?
Yeah, we definitely need training, but again, I'm going to re-emphasize, we also need to be more creative than that, and we need to push for new methods too, because if we are constantly pulling from the same methods that reify the notion that your property should be valued based on whose you live around, we're going to continue to perpetuate inequality across race and socioeconomic status. So not only do we need to train individuals who are appraisers to not be biased, we need to train them on a new method that is less racist and is pushing against the historical and contemporary patterns that we see play out over and over.
Okay, a lot to think about, and a lot of work ahead, but that is where we'll have to leave it. My thanks to Junia Howell, Marcus Knight, and Lutala McGee for joining us.
Thank you.
And up next, remembering civil rights activist and historian Timuel Black. And tonight we take a moment to remember Chicago historian and civil rights activist Timuel Black. Black died Wednesday at 102 years old after spending a week in hospice in his South Side home. As a lifelong Chicagoan, Black not only documented the city's history, he lived it.
If they free their minds and believe that they're as good as anybody else, then they'll work to break the barriers of racism.
Timuel Black is known in Chicago as a historian, educator, and advocate for social change. His family migrated to Chicago from Alabama in 1919 when he was less than a year old. He grew up on the South Side in what was known as the Black Belt, where he witnessed and experienced racism at a young age.
Don't spit on the sidewalk. Don't talk too loud.
Black attended Burke Elementary and DuSable High School. He went on to college at Roosevelt University and earned a master's degree from the University of Chicago before becoming a teacher. Black often joined us on Chicago Tonight, getting into heated discussions with mostly white panelists while speaking up for Black Chicagoans.
Are you saying that Daley was a racist?
Oh, yes, without equivocation, as far as I'm concerned.
Throughout his 102 years of life, Timuel Black experienced some of the world's most pivotal moments, from the bombing at Pearl Harbor to the nation electing its first Black president.
Hello, Chicago!
Black became a key player in the political scene and making Black history. He worked alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when he came to Chicago and helped elect the city's first Black mayor, Harold Washington. Black reflected on his social and political activism during an interview with me on his 100th birthday.
The attitude which had been inspired by my mother and father, that a change is going to come. The door is going to open. Be prepared to walk in.
As an educator and historian, Black has been telling stories his entire life, becoming a part of history himself.
My feelings is in those 100 years, though many negative things were part of my life, more positive things. And at this point, a sense of fulfillment. I feel satisfied that I have lived a happy, productive life for myself and for others.
And again, Timuel Black passed away on Wednesday at 102 years old. I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity, as we mentioned, to interview Black. That was to mark his 100th birthday nearly 3 years ago. But I never got to know him quite as well as so many other Chicago journalists, historians, and the writers that he mentored. Two of them are joining us now. Chicago Sun-Times columnist and analyst for ABC 7 News, Laura Washington, and Sherman Dilla Thomas, the urban historian, sharing Chicago history on TikTok. First of all, thanks to the both of you for joining us, and my condolences, because I know that he meant a lot to you. So Dilla, let's start with you, please. You know, as an historian yourself, what was your first reaction when you heard the news?
Despite him living to be 102, I was still very sad. I guess we figured that day would come at some point, right? But it's always too soon. So I definitely was sad, but I saw it on the internet. I don't want to take the quote, but I felt like a library burned that day. Like no matter how much he's talked to others or how many books he's written or how many people he's mentored, we'll never be able to get back all the information and history we just lost with his passing.
And Laura, you knew him well, of course. Had you been in touch with him recently or near the end?
Yes, I had, and it was, you know, it's like Sherman said, you think you're going to have him forever, and you can't have, you know, royalty and a treasure like that forever. I saw him maybe 10 days or so before he passed away. When I heard he was in hospice, I went for a visit, and Zenobia, his gracious wife, welcomed me into their home, and he was Tim. You know, he was frail, but he was sitting up in his chair, sitting up on his bed, telling stories, and he wanted to hear about what was going on out in Chicago. So at the end, he was always there for Chicago, and he always wanted to soak in and share the history.
I read Natalie Moore's obit on WBEZ, and of course, she knew him well. Laura, talk a little bit about, you know, the mentorship, sort of the honorary grandfather that she calls him, that he was for so many other people.
He was just, well, first of all, for his students, he taught hundreds, if not thousands, of young people that came through the Chicago City Colleges system, a system that is not often overlooked because it's a public city-run institution, but has a very powerful impact and reaches into a lot of communities, particularly working class and low-income communities in Chicago. So he reached and touched all those people. And he was just, I know as a reporter, I'm sure Natalie's had a similar experience. He was always available anytime, always there. I remember hearing a story, and I'm not sure if it's true, but where Zenobia, his wife, said she had to get a separate phone line because he was getting too many calls, and he was always on the phone. He was always there, willing to talk with you, willing to, so he was a resource, somebody I could, if I wanted to make sure I knew what was really going on in Chicago, what really mattered, I would always call Tim.
And Dilla, what can you say about sort of the impact that Timuel had on the work that you do? How has he inspired and motivated you?
That's a very great question. When I went to his home and sat to kind of, you know, ask for his permission, right, for me to chase his legacy, he asked me, was I into politics? And I said, no, I'm just a historian. He asked me, was I an activist? I said, no, I'm just a historian. He said, wrong. You are an activist. Historians tell the truth. And in a day and age where people don't always tell the truth, truth-telling is a form of activism. And so I think that's going to be the thing that I harp on, and that I try to remember, that, yes, it's important that we, one, make sure that Chicago is fully represented, right? A lot of times when we talk about Chicago history, certain sides of the city don't even get mentioned when they're just as important. And I think that was a big part of his work, not necessarily being a Black historian, but just making sure that the Black history of Chicago isn't left out of the picture.
Laura, you know, we think of him as a historian, and Dilla has just referenced this, you know, but not only did he live history, but he will also have a legacy as an activist. Talk a little bit about that work as well.
Well, particularly in the political arena, he connected with and made political stars. You think about the Harold Washingtons, the Barack Obamas, the Carol Moseley Browns, all these people started early in their careers knowing Tim and learning from Tim. And he, on the other hand, was also there to support them and to support their activism. He belonged to a number of different political organizations. He worked very closely with Dr. Martin Luther King and continued to work with organizations like Rainbow Push, just countless organizations that he either was a member of or organized around. But the thing that I think was most important about his work is that he kept people honest. He wasn't a, you know, go along to get along. He wasn't going to support a cause just because it was a Black cause. He had very high standards and he held people accountable. And from the Barack Obamas on down, he would tell them if he thought they were wrong.
And Dilla, you know, you're a much more modern historian, but you tweeted, this was last week, back when we knew that he was going into hospice, quote, "Don't worry, OG, I got it from here. Not gonna lie, that brought me to tears, but how are you planning to continue his legacy?"
It brought me to tears to tweet, fighting back tears now, just thinking about that. We even had someone of that importance. I've been saying it to anybody that listens. He was the Forrest Gump of our time. Anything of importance that happened in the 20th century, he either had firsthand knowledge of it because he got first person reporting as a storyteller, but also as a listener, or he lived through it, right? He was a World War II veteran. But to your point, he kept Chicago honest. He kept the storytellers honest. And that's what I intended to. I do intend to continue to highlight the beauty of Chicago. I do sincerely think we're the greatest city in the world, but in his legacy and in his memory, I also need to make sure that we're being equitable in the way we're telling our stories, and then the resource that follow because of those stories being told.
Real life Forrest Gump is an accurate description. Laura, in the few seconds that we've got left, what are some of the things that you think Chicago will remember about Timuel Black, and why he was so special to the city?
Because he was a man of so many things. He was a scholar, he was an educator, he was a political activist, he was a thinker, he was a historian, as we've discussed. He did it all and reached for it all, but yet he wasn't, part of the elites. He talked to the elites. He, as I said, kept the elites honest. And I think he, as Sherman says, he elevated our communities, particularly African-American communities that have been for so long overlooked. One of his books was called Sacred Ground. And I think he really told the story about how important and how sacred our communities are. And hopefully that will keep scholars and historians and activists like Sherman around and active for a long time to come.
Okay, may he rest in peace. My thanks to Dilla Thomas and Laura Washington for joining us. And we're back with more Chicago Tonight Black Voices right after this.
Don't miss one of our stories. Get them all delivered to your desktop or mobile device with a subscription to the WTTW News Daily Briefing. Go to WTTW.com/dailybriefing and sign up.
Back in February, we met 4 teenagers participating in the Chicago Musical Pathways Initiative. That's a program that helps students pursue careers in classical music. One of those students, Kaylee Holliday, began playing the cello at age 7. And she says she loves not just the sound of classical compositions, but the stories behind them. Here, Holliday talks about playing the most huggable string instrument as she plays the Courante from Bach's Cello Suite.
I love how it's like another person right next to you, and so like I can give a hug if I want, and it moves with me. I really like that. I love the vibe I get from the piece. It's very full of energy. I love, hip hop, jazz, R&B. There was a phase when I was like 8 where I only listened to stuff from like the 30s. I just love that you can put your emotion to all of those, and as opposed to, no shade, but opposed to electric music where it's more like a device rather than like a person that you can see and you can feel what they're feeling and all that.
And we'll enjoy a classical minute with another CMPI fellow in an upcoming Chicago Tonight Black Voices program. And that is our show for this weekend. Be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News, including details into the battle over vaccine mandates between the mayor's office and city workers. And if you're watching us on Saturday night, know that you can also catch Black Voices and Latino Voices on Sundays beginning at 10 p.m. And of course, join me and Paris Schutz next week at 7 for Chicago Tonight. And we leave you tonight with more from Kaylee Holiday from the Chicago Musical Pathways Initiative. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for sharing part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm dedicated to preserving the dignity and rights of all individuals.